Hey guys, how are we going?
Fantastic.
Everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
How's your day been with Nikki?
Awesome.
Excellent. There was some hesitation there, that's okay. As Nick said during the introduction, look, I'm going to take you on a journey to the highest point on the planet today. But it's really not about that. It's really about, for me, it was one of the best business development courses I could have ever done. I've run my own real estate business for the last 19 years. And as Nick explained to you, I've been fortunate to operate in that 19 years, for most of those years, in the top 5% of the industry. The industry today has a very high washout rate. So in real estate today, about 80% of real estate agents wash out every 3 years. So we'll talk a lot about, I guess, the elements of being successful on big expeditions, big mountains, but the direct linkage to those things that have helped us run a successful business. And it's not just about me, it's about the team of people that I work with, and so those key fundamentals that we work on a daily basis. Some interesting background for me. I'm not a professional mountaineer. I've embarked on doing the Explorers Grand Slam since climbing Everest, and so I go away and climb a big peak every year, and have done every year for the last. I've done 5 of the 7 summits in the last 6 years of my life, and also need to do the North and South Pole. So that's become an interesting journey for me. But when the opportunity came up for me to climb Everest, now this wasn't a commercial team. This was an Australian team that was being put together. I had a background of climbing. I climbed for many seasons in the Andes as a young fellow. But when the opportunity came up, it was really the most inopportune moment for me, in that I'd just been through a fairly unique life's experience for 3 years called a divorce. I'd spent about 3 years going through that process. I was certainly at a low point emotionally. I'd lost access to my daughter through that process. In fact, I had to fight for about 12 months just to see my what was a little 3-year-old girl at that point in time. Financially, I'd lost the privilege of losing about 80% of my asset base through that journey. And I was about 20 kilos out of shape. In fact, I weighed about 100 odd kilos pretty much when the opportunity was landed to me. And I said, this was a team of Australian climbers. This wasn't a commercial climb. This was a pretty serious thing. And the expedition leader, a good friend of mine, Ronnie Mule, it was a chance meeting. He was out here in Australia, and he offered me a shot onto this team of Australians. We were actually fortunate to be the most successful ever Australian team. We put all 5 Australians onto the summit. The washout rate on Everest, to share some statistics around that journey, about 90% of people that go to Everest will wash out. And there's a very, very high washout rate. And of course, of people that successfully go for the summit today, unfortunately, about 1 in 12 won't come off the hill alive. So they're pretty harsh numbers. But I think there's a lot within our journey to get to Everest in the lead-up phase that was helped us succeed as a team. And again, today, what I'm going to endeavour to do in the next sort of 45 minutes or so is really drill down for you into what are those key business learnings for me. What were those things those sort of blinding flashes of aha moments that were relevant for me. The difference on big hills, big expeditions, is that in business we get to have a cup of coffee and talk about what went wrong or whatever. We don't have to be as serious about some of these key fundamentals. On big peaks like Everest, they can become very much life-threatening, and so those things that are relevant, they're just exponentially relevant. I'm going to break today down for you really into 3 key phases. We're going to talk about the training phase. We had 11 months to run when the opportunity was offered to me to join this team. Now, normally to go onto a peak like Everest is years of training. It for me had been on my not negotiable goals list since I was a teenager. So for me, it was a had been on my list of things that I needed to do for a very long, a big part of my life, 25 years. But we only had 11 months to run when the opportunity was offered. So I'm going to talk about this training phase and the lead-up phase. There were 5 climbers thrown together who didn't know I knew one of the climbers, but to the other 3 climbers I'd never met before in my life. So these 5 individuals came together. And we're going to talk about the rotations phase. So the actual climb on this mountain is a 3-month climb, 3-month door-to-door as an expedition. It's actually 60 days of climbing. So it's a very long and arduous process. And that 60 days is broken down into 2 phases. The rotations phase, which we'll talk about today. That rotations phase is basically taking yourself from from base camp, I should say, increasing heights up the mountain each time, and then retreating back off the mountain back down to base camp to rest, and then the next rotation you'll push up through the mountain a little bit higher. You'll come back down again. You'll rest at base camp, and so the process follows on for about 6 to 7 weeks. Just to gently acclimatise yourself, if you took a human from base camp and put them on the summit of Everest, unacclimatised, you'd be dead in a matter of about 2 or 3 minutes because of the lack of atmosphere. So that's a 6 to 7 week process. And then we're going to talk about the summit bid. And the summit bid itself is really the easiest way to describe that is probably it's a 6-day back-to-back journey up this mountain from base camp fully acclimatized. And I guess it's like running probably 2 or 3 marathons a day for 6 days, of which in the middle of that you're not you can't sleep for a couple of days just because of logistical issues on the mountain, and you can't eat. Higher up on the mountain, the human body starts to shut down, and so things like your digestive system don't work. So there's some interesting challenges within that. Let's get into it, and I'm going to talk about the training phase. And you can see there that these days I train in an altitude chamber, which is a lot kinder. It's a glass environment that sort of raises the altitude for me. In those days, this was 2010, I was on this Australian team. We use things like gaffer tape over our mouth to simulate hypoxic breathing. So that's all about decreasing the airflow into our system, making our lungs, our system much more efficient. All of the training for a mountain like Everest is operating with your heart rate above about 160 beats a minute. So very different to normal training that you would do at sea level. It's literally holding, and these were 2-hour sessions, predominantly with backpacks on, where we're holding our heart rate between sort of 160 to 180 beats a minute. And I remember the first session we had of our coach. We had an Australian team coach. We're very fortunate. We were surrounded by a network or team of very good people to help us. And Joe Bonington, that's the ugly fellow on the bottom left there of the screen, was the Australian coach, Sir Chris Bonington's son. And I remember the first meeting, I said, Joe, let's talk through what this next 11 months of my life looks like. The whole team was sitting there. And of course, I was the one that looked a bit out of place. So I was the pudgy real estate agent in this group. And he said, Steve, I'm going to push you till you vomit, and then the training's going to start. And I remember I almost fell off my chair. I mean, I thought I was second guessing if I was actually in the right meeting. And literally the training for us, that training cycle for 11 months was the most incredible journey I've ever been on in my life. The training said every day. My business day starts at 7 a.m. in the office. I finish most days at about 8 o'clock at night. It's 6 days a week, so they're fairly long and intense days. I had to get up at 3:45 in the morning and start the training cycle for a couple of hours before I sort of rocked up to the office. Once a week we had a team fitness test, which was we affectionately called it the vomit test. On a Wednesday night, where the team would come back together and because we'd be off training obviously individually during the week following Joe's program, and then coming back to, I guess, with the fitness test, check that we were doing what we're supposed to have been doing. Our day off, which was on a Sunday, was invariably out doing about 10 to 14 hours in the field across about 50 to 70 kilometre pack sessions with 25 kilos of rice on our back. So that, that was literally our day off. But the training, one thing I want to drill into for you with the training, and I said this to Joe when we came back, and we've been successful as a team, because literally every session was about fundamentally pushing ourselves to breaking point, and then conditioning ourselves psychologically to push further, that there was going to be a little bit more in the tank. And I said to Joe when we came back, I said, Joe, I've realised what you were doing through this training cycle, how you actually helped us succeed as a complete team. You weren't training us physically, you were training us mentally. And when you train to that level of intensity mentally, the body has no choice but to come along and with that journey become supremely fit. We became very comfortable with the uncomfortable. Now, the lesson I want to share there, I think, that's relevant for me is what's helped us succeed and remain in the top 5% of this industry for a very long time. We earn every year within 10% of what our business planning tells us we're going to earn, and that's whether a market's going up or down or sideways. I've worked through a number of ups and down cycles. I've worked through the GFC, etc. When you train to become comfortable with the uncomfortable, when you train for when the, I guess proverbial, when the shit hits the fan, basically, and that's where your conditioning is all the time. If the market's traveling well, if the business environment that you're in is traveling well, then you logic says you're going to do well anyway. But if you're conditionally training on the hard stuff, it's when then things get tough, you can instinctively react to that, and you've trained for it, so there's a sense of familiarity with that, and you can continue on. So to relate that to my business, which is real estate, the hard stuff that we train on are what I call the high dollar productive conversations. So the most important or the most high dollar productive thing I do is present our services to clients. We convert 92% of those opportunities. The general market average is about 20%. We train on that stuff all the time. We train on prospecting. We get very uncomfortable and have a lot of fun getting uncomfortable in front of each other in a training environment, so that and I'm the first person to put myself out there and look silly or stupid in front of someone to have some fun, so that when we're out there, and for us, those conversations in selling real estate in Sydney, they're 30, 40, 50, sometimes $80,000 conversations, those meetings. And so we don't want to be mucking around in those conversations. We want to make sure the prep work is done. In working with a lot of younger agents today coming into the industry, and as I said, there's a high turnover rate of about 80% every 3 years or so. And typically in this industry, and I've just seen a whole I'm generalising, but a whole wash of them come in. There's a whole breed of younger agents coming in. They've got bright ties. They've leased a BMW. They've got themselves a mobile phone. They've been told they're going to, make $1 million overnight, sort of thing. But training with the young ones, they say, or new people in the industry, how do you get over 90% of people that you sit in front of? And what I say to people is, it's the success is determined before you turn up. I know when I walk into a presentation that I'm the best person to maximise the value of that person's property. I'm the best asset at play to maximise the profit for that client in their home. And I know that because I pay that price every day in my training and development that I'm going through. And what that does for you psychologically is incredible. I see people in business that they turn on for business sort of between 9 and 5, but after business hours, they're doing nothing in terms of their personal development, their growth, and they turn up to work and they expect that they're just going to perform. The other thing I would share with you through this training cycle, I think it's directly relevant to business, is that your business will only grow, from my experience, if you are continually growing as an individual. And I often say who you are is what you do when no one's watching you. So when I was training for Everest, no one got to see what I was doing at 4 a.m. when it was raining, and I was probably really questioning on a number of occasions, why am I out here doing this? I'm not very comfortable with it. It's what you're doing when no one's watching it. It's most relevant. Obviously, you're improving your skill set technically in the businesses that you operate in, but it's more about what that does for you from a psychology standpoint in dealing with the clients that you're dealing with. We're energy creatures, and at the end of the day, I say that the chinks in the armour will only show when the going gets tough. So you've got to pay the price to make sure that you deserve to be sitting in front of that client, irrespective of what the product is that you're selling, or perhaps if you, in our industry, are obviously selling a service. So we went through this training phase, and I by this stage, 11 months later, I'd lost about 20 odd kilos, and I wanted to know, I guess, at the end of that cycle, that I'd done everything I possibly could to be worthy to be a part of that team, that I'd done everything I possibly could. It's an expensive exercise. We, commercial teams today, you'll spend between $60,000 to $80,000 US to get on a team. So we're a team of climbers, so we're operating as climbers, and with logistical support, etc. It was still a $45,000 US exercise. And so you really want to make sure that just for that reason alone, let alone everything else, that you want to give it to the best crack that you possibly can. We got through that phase, and so we then went to the mountain. And has anyone in the room been to the Himalaya, by the way, at all? No. Okay. Anyone done any climbing? No. Okay. I'm going to show you the route now for you. I don't know if you can see the screen well or not where you are, but the red triangles show you where the camps are located, and then the route obviously follows in between. That bottom triangle, base camp is about 17,500 feet. Base camp itself, to give you some perspective, base camp, or the resting point on this mountain, is the same height as the summit, almost the same height as the summit of Kilimanjaro. So that is the resting point on this mountain, is already a very high point. It's not a very kind environment at all. The next triangle up, Camp 1, is above the Khumbu Icefall. So in between that bottom triangle and the next one up is this icefall, which is a vertical river of ice and cliffs of ice. That's a moving environment. It's the most dangerous part, or one of the most dangerous parts on the mountain, because it literally is Russian roulette going through there. And of course, interestingly, when you go on this rotations phase, the first place that you go through going up onto the mountain, and the last place that you come off when you're coming off the mountain on the rotation, is this Khumbu Icefall. And this is one of the big challenges with the mountain. The next triangle, Camp 2, is the third triangle up from the bottom, is Camp 2 Advanced Base Camp, 6,400 metres, or about 22,000 feet, 21,000 feet. Advanced Base Camp, where we spent most of our time higher on the mountain to acclimatise. And so we spent most of our time at Base Camp, bottom triangle, and then Camp 2. The next place above Camp 2 is Camp 3, up on the Lhotse face at 24,000 feet. So through the rotations phase, which we're going to move into now, we take ourselves from that base camp point up. So the first rotation, we went up, I guess, about 3/4 of the way up into the icefall, and retreated, came back down again, rested for about 2 or 3 days. Next rotation, pushed up to Camp 1, then came back down to base camp, rested for 2 or 3 days. Next rotation, push up through Camp 1 to get to Camp 2, etc. And so the process unfolds across this sort of 6 or 7 weeks. So the highest point we got to was Camp 3, 24,000 feet through this. We touched that camp through this rotations phase. A bit later this afternoon, we'll then talk about above that level, Camp 4, the South Col, and then a place we call the Death Zone, and up to the summit. And we'll talk a bit about that through the actual summit push and why we call that environment the Death Zone. The ice fall, I knew about these crevasses and ladders that we had to cross. Now, this was a baby one. This was 2 ladders tied together. The longest crevasse I crossed was 7 of these ladders tied together. 7 of them. I kid you not, when you're going across these crevasses and you're going across these huge chasms and you look down, it starts at white and it's sort of light blue, darker blue, black, and then there's this black abyss below you. You know, it's I mean, I don't think I've ever experienced so much fear in my life as what I did going across these ladders. I said to Lakpa Rangdu, a good mate of mine, our head Sherpa, I said, Lakpa, I said, give me some pearls of wisdom about going across these ladders. Now, you'll note on this image that we wear crampons on ice, which are spikes that strap onto the bottom of your boots. So it gives you good purchase on the ice. And his pearl of wisdom to get across these ladders, he said, yeah, Steve, don't look down. And now if you have a look at those spikes, the front points just get over the front rungs, and there's a rear set of spikes that just get over the rear rungs of each ladder. And I've got to tell you, it's absolutely not possible to get across these ladders and not actually be looking directly down. So I learnt the art, and I want to talk to you about what I did here mentally. But and again, for me, it was something in business or in success in life that I think is critical, and it was blinding flash for me. I learned the art of graying out what was going on below the ladder, and I just acknowledged the ladder, and I just made sure that every step was relevant. So I just focused on every step only, not beyond that, and making sure that that step was a damn good one, a safe one. I grayed out what was going on below the ladder. I didn't acknowledge that in my mind at all. I just zeroed in my focus on those spikes and that step to get across these ladders. Now, I met people in this, it started this journey on teams where they took one look at the ladders, one look at the ice fall, and left teams. No refunds, left their $60,000, $80,000 US on the table, and literally left teams. They just couldn't get across these things. And I think today, if I look at our business success or other things that I've been fortunate to do, I think that's a lot about life. I think that we all aspire to big things. I think it's very important that we zone in our focus and zone in our fear control to a level that we can take mental ownership of. So what I mean by that is, here on the ladders, it's self-evident. If I allowed myself to acknowledge what was going on below the ladder, and acknowledge the crevasse below it, I would have not been able to get across these ladders. End of story. Would have been end of expedition. If I think about it in business today, and I liken it to younger or newer people I work with in this industry that come into the industry, I meet most people said they come in and they might have been earning $50,000, $100,000 a year, whatever it may be, and they say, well, I'm going to make, $500,000 my first year or something. And the vast majority of agents, 80% won't make it. They're gone within a year or two. And most agents, in fact, less, make $50,000, $60,000 a year at best, believe it or not. The issue is not one of they couldn't do it. It's about what they can take mental ownership of. So what I've learned over the years is to focus them into perhaps a stretch target over what they're earning. So if they're earning $100,000, I'll say, great, I'll help you make $200,000 year one. Yep, you could do 500 million, whatever, but I'll just help you to get to 150,000 or 200,000, whatever they can actually take mental ownership of, and actually completely own in their heart. That's the first issue, drilling down whatever those things are in life. Remember I said my view is success in business is all about you growing. It's all about you pushing the boundaries of yourself. If you business is just an adjunct of who we are. It's just a byproduct or a part of who we are. So we've got to grow as individuals. So we have to be continually growing. The dilemma in life, I think, is if we're not continually growing, we're actually going backwards. If we look at business today, there's always someone coming up leaner, meaner, whatever, something new. We have to be continually growing. So simplifying those targets, simplifying those goals. So for me, it might have been just the next step, or I'm just going to get across this ladder. So that's the first key component. The second key component for me is you need to develop, in my opinion, the ability to grey out that white noise, those fears, those things that aren't relevant. So you need to be able, and the challenge in life is this: the bigger things that we go after in our life, usually there's the bigger fears associated with. We all have things in our gut that we may not have shared with other people that we know is our life's purpose. We know that that's something we need to actually go after. That's something, if I'm at age 80 looking back at my life, I don't go after, I'm going to be disappointed in myself. They're the things that we need to chase in our life. That's where inspiration comes from. But what we have to be able to do is break those down into much smaller parcels so we're continually growing all the time. And those bigger goals, so something like Everest for me, whilst when the time came up, it wasn't the right timing for me, I'd been, in very small ways, growing towards that target for 25 odd years. So I think there's two key components in that for me that was very relevant business that as I go forward, I've got a lot better today at greying out the fears, greying out that white noise that's surrounding me. And, the things I guess that we achieve today are probably considered to be fairly good in this industry, but that's been a consequence of all of these smaller goals and steps each year, these smaller targets. When you do that, when you stick your head up and you just focus on that only, and every now and then you allow yourself to stick your head up and have a look back at where you've come from, that's the point in time that often you'll make your head spin just from how much growth you've actually achieved. And the problem you've got today is we're more distracted today than we were years ago. When I started in this business, we had mobile phones that looked like bricks. We operated with fax machines. And I can tell you now, I was every bit as successful almost in those days without all the technology. And so technology has a place. Technology is great. Technology is important. But lining, I don't know that noise. Does everyone hear me okay still?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Those distractions around us, it's even tougher to zone out those distractions. And again, a lot of the newer people I see, the younger people coming into this industry today, that's a very big challenge for us when working with them on their goals, working with them on zoning out fears, etc. It's very much about also limiting those distractions so they're just head down, bum up, and focused on what the key outcomes are. I'll tell you another very funny story actually too. So I like to think I'm a fairly thoughtful guy. We'll talk about specialised training, the value of specialised training. So we talked a bit about in our business training for presentations, training on those high dollar productive conversations, and obviously specific training in mounting an expedition to Everest. I decided, I knew I was going to be challenged by these ladders. So I bought a long ladder, aluminium ladder. I bought 2 step ladders and I lashed them up in my backyard. And at night I'd come home and I'd kick off still in my suit, I'd kick off my shoes, I'd strap on my boots and crampons, I'd stick on my headlight torch, and I'd go backwards and forwards on this step ladder out in my backyard. Thank God none of my neighbours ever saw me. I tell you now, training about 1.5 feet off your backyard and believing that's conditioning for going across seemingly bottomless crevasses. It had absolutely no relevance whatsoever. So specialised training is very important, trying to simulate the environment that you're going into. I got through this overcoming the ladders, and this is the top of the Khumbu Icefall. This is the up near Camp 1, if you remember the original image that we looked at. This is me on the ladder. It wasn't this rotation, it was the next rotation. Actually, I was on this ladder, I was coming up, I was by myself. So a lot of people think you travel up and down this mountain as a team, lots of Sherpas around you. Look, you can be in various combinations. The next rotation, I was climbing solo. You can often be by yourself doing a rotation. Might be 2 team members together, it might be you and a Sherpa, whatever, because 60 days of actual climbing, everyone is acclimatizing differently. And so some people are out at base camp sick, others might be higher, others might be below base camp with some medical issue going on. And I had a significant challenge on this second rotation. I was coming up this ladder. I said it's the top of the icefall. And the process with this top glacier is it fractures and breaks off and then basically jumbles down and creates this vertical waterfall of icefall. I was minding my own business. I was literally about 1 metre below where you can see me on the ladder at the moment, on this very ladder. And minding my own business, and all of a sudden there was an almighty crack. And the ladder shook. There was a deathly crack that ricocheted up the valley, and like a snap. And this ice cube I'm climbing at the moment, it's about 200 metres wide, to give you some perspective on it. And the ladder shook, and I realised this top of the icefall, this particular section, had decided it was going to fracture while I'm on it, trying to climb it. And I thought I was dead. In fact, I remember my whole world slowed down. I became warm. I felt warm. I remember making peace with the fact I was going to die. In fact, in my mind, I had all these key moments in my life that had flashed up. My daughter, the birth of my daughter. Just all these key things, rapid fire flashing into my mind. It was the strangest feeling. I remember thinking, I'm dead. This is it. This is how it goes. And my whole world just slowed down. And it felt like minutes. I think it was probably seconds logically. And then all of a sudden I remember thinking, no, I have to live. My daughter, I have to get back to Georgia. I have to live. And and again, because of the journey I'd been through, I'd fought very hard to get access, etc. And I've got to live. I've got to get back to her. The next thing I remember consciously remembering was I all of a sudden became aware of my heart. My heart was probably beating at about 200 beats a minute. It was going to beat out of my chest cavity. And there was this delayed adrenaline reaction, I think. And I remember all of a sudden I pumped for dear life as fast as I possibly could. I have to live. I have to live. Up the last couple of meters of this ladder. And of course I was operating at the speed of about a turtle up at this altitude. And I got up over the top of the ladder. I remember moving probably about 20 metres up the glacier, and I saw the fracture line. It was only about a foot wide at that point, and I remember stepping across it, looking each way. And it's a 200-metre long fracture line. I remember walking across it and moving up probably about another 20, 30 metres and sitting down on my backside and just, heart rate thinking, that's, what am I going to do? That was almost the end. And I'm going to play an interview for you now. It's a self-interview, and this is the morning after that night. And so I had the unique pleasure of being with myself that night to contemplate that experience. And this evening was certainly the closest I came to leaving the expedition. I'll play the interview for you now. Good morning. It's Saturday, the 1st of May today. So 30 days into the expedition.
So my night at Camp 1 by myself, and a bit icky. I was about -9 in a tent. I recorded it was about midnight. I went to sleep after that, but so I don't know what I got down to, but yeah, so just cooking myself some breakfast, getting ready for the trudge up to Camp 2, and it's about 7:30 in the morning, just waiting for the sun to hit the tent, which would be nice. Probably get fired up, pump some liquids into myself. So had a pretty good night's sleep. I woke up a lot thinking about what happened in the ice fall yesterday. I don't mind telling you, it scared the crap out of me. I really thought I was done for. It was a scary thing. You know, I guess you question, why would you come and climb Mount Everest? Why would you come and do something so seemingly unreasonable? I guess it's been with me my whole life. I'm committed to doing it, but things like yesterday happen, you question. I think you question it. I think you question, am I being responsible to, particularly my daughter, you know, who's only 7, and she needs her dad around. But anyway, I plan to come back, okay, and glad when that ice fall work is over. Anyway, I'll continue brewing my brew. And it's a beautiful day outside. You can see out there, okay.
Look at the size of that crevasse.
And I'll probably catch up with you at Camp 2.
Everyone hear the video, Kate?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I worked through that evening, and as I said, you know, that for me was one of that key moments in the expedition. It was the closest I came to leaving expedition rotation 2. And it was all about, for me, it was all about my daughter. It was all about Georgia. In fact, Georgia was the hardest part of this expedition for me. And it was all about this rationalisation that I'm her father, I'm a parent. Should I be doing this? Is this, you know, something's just trying to, I've really got, you know, some challenges here, some things that are trying to take me out to ensure I don't go back alive. And I worked through that evening, and I came through that. And what I rationalised, I mean, I was very committed to coming back, obviously, in one piece. In fact, I'd rationalised if I was going to lose fingers and toes through frostbite, I would turn and come back to go again at some point. What I rationalised was that to keep going forward was that if I didn't come back off the mountain alive, and so, you know, obviously incredibly focused and committed to mitigate that risk and make sure that I would. But what I rationalised was that if I perished, if I didn't come back, and remember, I had a unique lead up to this journey. I'd been through some stuff personally. What I rationalised was that the message I would give my daughter through this would be one of the most important messages a parent could ever give a child, to help arm them with some of the tools and skills for life. And that message for me was, no matter how unlikely something looks in terms of your success, no matter how much obviously people tell you that you can't do something, no matter how much courage you need, how much challenge there is, if it's something you really need to go for in your life, then you step up and you go for it. Absolutely. Those things in your gut, you get them out of your gut, and you have integrity with them, and you go forward. And so that message, I said, I was very committed to coming back alive, but that message for me, for Georgia, if I didn't come back, I believe that would hopefully give her some element of courage for her own life to go forward. So we worked through this rotations phase, and there'd been a significant washout rate. the vast majority of the 90% of people that wash out on this mountain will do so in the rotations phase. That is, the 90% of people that wash out will normally do so on the rotations phase. There've been some deaths at this point, which is obviously one of those hard things with this mountain to deal with, and very tragic things. But the vast majority of people, and it's interesting, the people I met going to this hill, I met a lot of people who were younger, leaner, meaner, hairier chested, better bios, whatever. I mean, I was quite intimidated looking at, meeting a lot of the people on this mountain, thinking, Jesus, I'm some real estate agent from the northern beaches of Sydney. A lot of those people were washed out quite early on. And again, I think a lot of that's about your reasons for being there. We talked about, obviously, the quality of training through that process. A lot of people had probably an element of arrogance on this mountain. We have managed to summit Everest. We all share the same attitudes towards the mountain. Obviously you've got to have good control over yourself, and you've got to exert, exceptional determination and everything else. But at the end of the day, the mountain will also dictate who is allowed to sneak up her flanks, and we believe that's a lot about your intent, your reasons for being there being of pure origin. So we got through the rotations phase, and we went lower, and we went to rest at about 1,000 metres below base camp at a tea house, and now that's me in the bottom right of that, bottom left, I should say, of that image. I'd earned the nickname the Yeti by this point, and there were no mirrors at base camp, so I hadn't seen my face for about 6 or 7 weeks, and I scared the crap out of myself when I looked in the mirror at this tea house. I mean, I had Charles Manson beard, Johnny Howard eyebrows, etc. And unfortunately, that nickname has stuck with me now for every climb since. I'm now known as the Yeti. But we went down here for about 5 or 6 days to rest after this 6 or 7 weeks. We weren't supposed to drink. We literally drank the bar out solid night one. And we then had to go and send the porters lower to restock all of the alcohol supplies for the next 5 or 6 days. We're eating like demons, dropping 1,000 metres below base camp. So it's just incredible what that does to your metabolism. And all of a sudden, we were literally two big breakfasts, 2 big lunches. Every day was sort of, dinner was 2 big yak steaks and potatoes and double desserts and everything else. I mean, I chuckled with the guys and said, geez, if we're here any longer than 5 days, I would have got too fat again. I wouldn't have been able to get back up the hill. But the whole idea is we rest here and recharge our body, waiting for this summit window. Now, Everest only can be summited normally a day or 2, sometimes 3 days every year. And a lot of people don't realise that. At 29,000 feet, it sits in the jet stream. It just literally, the winds are too strong for the rest of the year. And what happens is late May, every year the monsoon season comes in. The monsoon basically nudges the jet stream away from the course of the jet stream, a little bit away from the summit of Everest and some of the Himalaya region, to allow us hopefully to look for that 1 day or 2 day window where the winds are low enough to be able to try and sneak up the mountain and get to the summit. We rested down here, and we got the green light 5 days later that we're going to go back up onto the hill. It's now it's getting real now, if it wasn't already real enough, but we're now launching into that summit bid. And so we now know that we're going to go back up to base camp and then move into the 6-day back-to-back marathon to try and get up to the summit. So 4 days up, 2 days back down. I'm going to play an interview again for you now. This interview is, we've taken 2 days from this point to get back up to base camp, and we're launching that night. So we've been packing all day, repacking our gear, and about to 2-3 o'clock in the morning this evening, we're going to be launching then onto this summit bid. I'll play the interview for you now.
Well, today's Tuesday the 18th, and today's D-Day. Tomorrow we leave at 3 a.m. to make our summit bid. Weather today looks pretty good, but the winds upstairs are still been pretty strong. So so just getting back sorted. Feels a little bit like going to war. What I imagine that would be in terms of packing. Some teams yesterday, and they got hammered. There was been some summits, which has been good. There's another lady that died in South Cole yesterday, which was pretty sad. We saw a couple of bodies helicoptered out yesterday, literally hanging from the bottom of the helicopters. Breakfast time, straight over base camp and out. So you see this stuff, and it's unsettling. So keeping focused. I need to give it the best shot of my life. I've experienced some hard things in my life, but I've got no doubt that this will be probably the hardest. So up to Camp 2 tomorrow, 3 a.m. Rest day, Camp 2 the next day, up to Camp 3, 7,200 metres the next day, 21st, onto the oxygen, up to Camp 4, South Cole, the following day, and the summit bid will leave 9 p.m. on the 22nd, hopefully summiting on the 23rd. So 2 months prep, well, I should say years of prep, but 2 months sitting here at base camp, doing some rotations, getting prepped and ready for a massive adventure. Cheers for now.
So we launched this night up on the summit bid and said the day was spent packing and repacking gear. The environment we moved into was about -50, -60 still air temperature, plus wind chill. So we knew that, and so you need a lot of redundancy in your gear at those sort of temperatures. So things like even our glove system, we wear 3 gloves on big mountains like Everest. There's an inner glove, there's a mid-weight glove, and then there's an outer over mitt, super mitt, which is really like a mini sleeping bag for your hands. So even something simple like losing an over mitt in -50, 60 degrees on a summit bid, you're guaranteed to lose certainly a lot of your digits. It's the end of the expedition. Of course, it could be much more serious than that. So, I mean, I think I repacked my bag probably 7 times that day, just checking I had all the right gear I needed. And then about 3 a.m. the next morning, we left. And we're going to fast track 2 days for you up to, this is up on the Lhotse face. This is actually Camp 3, where we switch onto the oxygen. So we wear supplemental oxygen on Everest. The supplemental oxygen gives you about 1,000 metres of height benefit. A lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think you pop the oxygen on and it's like a fully pressurised system. It's only about 1,000 metres of height benefit. The limit of human endurance is about 7,000 metres, about 24,000 feet, or in fact the height of Camp 3. So the challenge with Everest is that at Camp 4, the high camp, which is 8,000 metres, at 8,000 metres on the oxygen, it's like being back at 7,000 metres without the oxygen. You're back at the limit of human endurance. The reason they call the space above Camp 4 the death zone is that because you're operating now above the limit of human endurance, even with the oxygen on, people die. Unfortunately, people just literally fall over and perish. It's a very nasty, very scary environment, and it's a place that we want to really try and spend as least time as possible. And so that's why we don't go into that zone until the actual summit bid, and we try and push through there as fast as humanly possible. I'm going to discuss a couple of key things now that I think, again, for us, they were very relevant on the expedition. I think they're incredibly relevant in business today. I'm going to talk to you about not negotiables. We, as a team, knew that we needed to set a raft of not negotiables. That is, and we set them to sea level. We reset them again at Kathmandu. What we didn't want to do is talk about them or set them operating higher on this mountain without the benefit of coherent thinking in a rarefied atmosphere. And so a lot of our not negotiables were around if someone's dying, basically, if there's some key issues, how do we react as a team? What do we do? And in fact, a lot of our training cycle had been obviously contingency training, as we talked about. So it's all about when the shit hits the fan. In business today, what I see a lot is people don't have not negotiables. You don't need to have a lot of not negotiables, but to share with you, in our real estate world, we have a key small list of not negotiables, which is essentially what we stand for in business. Most of our not negotiables relate to customer service standards. So it relates to what the experience is of a member of the general public coming in and dealing with our team, dealing with our business. And so it relates to simple things like, how long does it take us to get back to someone? What's the quality of the information? What's the quality of the negotiation experience? What's the quality of the vendor service process, etc.? It's beyond those not negotiables. It's great to have creativity. It's great to have your team, in my opinion, engaged to help businesses grow. But you absolutely, categorically, in my opinion, have to know what you stand for, and you have to know those bedrock things that simply are not negotiable. On a mountain like Everest, we understand that those not negotiables will be linked to potentially whether or not you come back alive. So it becomes a lot more serious. But in business, again, when I look at 80% plus, Nick will be able to give you the exact statistics of small businesses that fail every short period of time. For me, then that means it's pretty serious. You know, if you've got a business, if you're growing a business, and us as small business owners, it takes up a big part of our life, a big part of our world. I think they are very serious things. But I encourage you to, I realised from this Everest journey that those not negotiables that we have are critical, and we've explored obviously and locked in a few more that said link around what we actually stand for in the marketplace. The other thing I want to talk to you about as we The other thing I want to talk to you about now, that was the last 800 metres. This was the top of the Lhotse face. I'd thought we're getting up close to Camp 4. I thought, right, this thing's in the bag, sort of, and we've just got to climb through all the night, not eat and sleep and whatever, and we'll touch the summit and come back down again. This was the last sort of 800 metres, and I thought, should we have to climb this thing through at night? I want to talk a bit about energy management, because I think energy management is really, it's very important. Obviously, on big mountain expeditions, we understand that, but energy management in your business, in your life, is absolutely critical. It's on Everest, obviously. On an Everest team, we understand we had our nutrition was tight, our training was tight, and we worked very hard to build our energy. And we had to deliver that energy with razor focus, with precision on this expedition. And the dilemma with Everest, of course, is those challenges become greater across 60 days as your body is wasting away. And by the time I actually went on the summit bit, I left at 82 or 3 kilos. I was down to about 69 or something by the time, which for me is incredibly light. By the time I actually went for the summit bit, it's mentally you're being attacked every day. So you have to protect that energy and deliver it in precision, in the direction that's relevant, that's important to hopefully reach the summit. Well, in business today, in life, I think it's equally important. So what I encourage people to do is, look, you don't have to go out and run a marathon. You don't have to, if you're not used to training, but, push yourself a little bit. If you haven't been doing anything, head out, walk around the block. Spend a half an hour, get up a half an hour earlier every morning. to set yourself up for a great day. Do something that's good for your body to just lift your energy reserve on a daily basis. Try and eat reasonable stuff. You don't have to be a super machine in terms of following a diet, but fundamentally put good stuff in. Try and get good sleep. Drink your 2 litres of water every day. Read some good stuff. Watch some good stuff. To just build your general energy levels. And then again, we spoke earlier about graying out the white noise. You know, I've got a lot better as I've got older about quickly asking myself a simple question, which is, that thing that's coming into my world, that thing that's trying to take my attention, is it relevant or not? Is it consistent with my journey? And unfortunately, as you grow, as you become more successful, you have to get a lot better at saying no. You have to get a lot better at limiting your time with people, with things that just are not consistent with your journey. Now, I said at the start of this today that who you are is what you're doing when no one's watching you. This is challenging for us to think about, I think, but if you're going home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, you've watched Facebook 56 million times throughout the day to check in on some nonsense. The first thing you do is you get home and you have a glass of wine, you talk about how bad your day was, and then you watch one of these garbage reality TV shows that's whatever the latest one is, Nick, I can never remember. And you fill your head with that stuff, and then you get up the next morning and you hit the opportunity to fail button. I call it the snooze button. I call it the failure button. So you hit that 2 or 3 times. So you let yourself down at the start of the day already 2 or 3 times before you get going. It makes sense that you're going to have some significant challenges in building a successful business. So again, on Everest, we were told, we knew this, we couldn't take any baggage with us, life's baggage, good stuff, bad stuff. We knew that when we went to this mountain, we literally had to shut out pretty much completely the whole world to zone in our focus, because this is not an environment that you can be distracted in, obviously, for 60 days of climbing. We got up to Camp 4, and I'll show some shots a little bit higher up on this mountain. We had left Camp 3, and basically from Camp 3, we now climb for 2 days non-stop with no sleep, and we're going to climb up through the evening. The next morning, as the sun comes up on Everest, you really start to realise where you are. It's an incredibly breathtaking environment. You look around and most of the peaks are lower than you. It's just no picture, no video that you could ever watch would ever give it due credit. You can hear the wind picking up, and explain the wind on Everest is one of the big challenges. Talk about the games that you play with yourself. I remember thinking there was my expedition leader had turned 150 metres from the summit on a previous expedition. He'd been successful in Everest, but another previous expedition, he had to turn 150 metres literally from the summit due to the wind. And I remember watching these 2 guys in front of me as this wind is picking up, and I remember looking at them and sizing them up and going, I'm a little bit fatter than you blokes, a bit heavier, so if you guys start to lift off, hopefully I can still turn around, retreat, and get back down to the relative safety of Camp 4. We made our way up, and this is the south summit, this image. This isn't the summit proper. This is, when you look at an image of Everest, this is that kink, the second summit that's a bit lower and off to the right. The significance of this point, I remember coming over the top of this, is you get to see the final ridge. And I remember coming over the top of this and finally getting to see that little bit of real estate at 29,028 feet that I'd held in my heart for literally 25 years of my life. I I want to talk just again about one other key fundamental that I want to share. I think is important. It's a concept I call rotational leadership. We on this mountain, as a team of 5 climbers, as I said, in an environment where there's a 90% failure rate, to get all 5 Australian climbers, said the most successful ever Australian team onto the mountain. In fact, the next most successful was 4 Australians back in our first expedition, which was 1986. You can't always be up. You can't always be at the front. And so we moved into what I call rotational leadership throughout this whole journey. That is, we would rotate leadership often without even speaking. It was, someone would just naturally take the leadership role without words being spoken. It was just this natural process. And we each had this trust and faith and mutual respect to allow each other to do that. Now, we had achieved that in our training cycle. You think about business today, and I think about our business and what we do, my key outcome, how I know if I've performed well as a coach, is if I've helped someone become better than I am in my industry. That's my measure. If I've helped and I've gone on to been helpful to, been a small part of a number of agents' journeys in this industry, have gone on to become far better than I have. Some of them are in the top 10 to 20 agents in the country today. When you train at that level with that thought process and you're operating as a team, when you put yourself out there as a leader, you roll up your sleeves, you're the first person that's happy to look silly, and really just roll up your sleeves and get into the mix, and you earn the trust of your team. It's, again, when the market gets tough, when your business gets tough in whatever industry you're in, that really is called into account. And the energy of that team can then push through. Most leaders, I call them leaders, most managers I see today, unfortunately, they never want to look bad in front of people that they're working with. Or for those of you that don't have staff, and we talk about mentoring with good people, we all know that we mentor with people better than what we are in whatever the endeavour is. But when you're prepared to look silly and stupid, when you're prepared to grow, when you're prepared to actually put yourself out there, it's a game when the shit hits the fan. I've got, as Nick said, I've got a very small circle of friends as well. But it's when the going gets tough that you can call on those people, that you've been humble, that people really understand you. It's that energy that you can feed from within a team or within your mentorship team that can help you sort of propel forward. We got through over this last ridge and up to a place called the Hillary Step. And this is the top of the Hillary Step. The Hillary Step itself is a 40-foot wall of vertical rock that's just below this 45 line above it. It's the last obstacle in Everest. I'm sure at sea level, for a lot of people not used to climbing 40 feet of vertical rock with spikes on your boots and a downsuit on, etc., would be tough. But I can guarantee you at 29,000 feet, I don't know how I got up there. I think I got up there on fumes alone. But I'd learned this process with every challenge of just sitting my head down and shaking and laughing and going, okay, there's another challenge. Just throw it at me. I've got another step in the tank. I can keep going. Got up on the final summit ridge. And there's me on the summit. I've got one image on the summit without my goggles on, so hopefully you can verify that's my eyebrows or something. But I got to spend 18 minutes up there. Privileged to spend so much time. Most summiteers will only get 2 or 3 minutes or so, just because of the incredibly low temperatures, the winds, the things that are going on. I got to spend 18 minutes, which was wonderful. And, people often ask me, they say, what's the summit of Everest like? And I say, you know where you are. You look out, you do see for hundreds of miles. You can see the curvature of the earth. You look up and it's a dark colour. It's almost a black. It's not like the sky down here at sea level. My overwhelming sensation was that I was on the edge of space. And I very quickly remembered and realised that this is only halfway. And when that clicked, and I thought, I'm sitting on this little bit of ice, almost seemingly on the edge of space, and this is halfway, I actually need to get back alive again. My focus was Georgia. I need to get back for my daughter. And so you ever so gently make your way slowly back towards life and civilization. Of course, a lot of people perish on the way down simply because you've got to go past any known limit that you've ever had to even get close to the summit of Everest. So you learn this incredible thing about us as humans and what we can actually achieve. And we're surrounded by these really warm and fuzzy comfort levels at sea level that really doesn't just give us a real appetite and understanding of what we can achieve. But there is an end point when you're in that grey zone. Unfortunately, there is a point at which you've actually just gone too far. One of those not negotiables for us as a team was we understood above Camp 3 that if we couldn't get back under our own steam, then you were going to die. We had to understand that very clearly and make those decisions independently as team members. I'll share a very, very quick funny story with you. I don't know, Nick, if we've got time, but I have lots of funny stories on mountains. They all relate to going to the toilet, unfortunately. And this is a number one, not a number two story, but I've got plenty of number two stories. But number one story, so we hadn't had an issue really with going to the toilet on the way up the mountain. We weren't drinking very much, obviously. You just can't in this environment. You can't eat, obviously, as well. I was almost back. We'd left the summit. I was almost back down at Camp 4. And I was 100 metres above Camp 4. I was looking down at Camp 4. It was sort of abseiling terrain, so it's fairly steep trying to get down there. And I all of a sudden needed to go to the toilet, number one. So I had this fight on in my brain about, do I do it in my down suit or do it out of my down suit? And I rationalised that, no, this down suit has got me to the summit of Everest. It'll be disrespectful to go to the toilet in my down suit. Go figure the things we think at altitude. Anyway, so I had a climbing harness on. I had the ropes. I had oxygen mask, lots of stuff going on. So I started this process of moving zippers, harnesses, ropes, etc. And I became quite frantic because after about 5 minutes, I actually couldn't find it. And now, my disclaimer always when there's ladies in the room is that it was minus 30, so give a guy a break. But I talk about getting to know your Sherpas well because Lakpa Rungdu was in front of me, and I motioned to Lakpa, like this, yeah, Lakpa, come here, I've got a problem. And I explained the problem, and he dug in, he found it and pointed it for me. And I did what I needed to do. And the only thing dear Lakpa has ever said to me about this since that day was then, he said, Stephen, he said, you're very dehydrated. So I owe Lakpa beers for the rest of my life, I'm sure. I'm just going to play one final wrap-up interview. We took 2 days to get down off this mountain. I remember getting across the last crevasse, the last ladder, the last crevasse. I remember very clearly standing on that lip, looking back up at the mountain and thinking, nothing can kill me now. I think I've made this thing. And at that point was the point I actually acknowledged summiting. I actually acknowledged to myself that I'd actually made it. And this whole wave of emotion swept over me, just the most incredible wave of emotion I've ever experienced, I think, other than the birth of my daughter. And, I've been processing this journey, a number of journeys ever since. But 3 days later, we spent 3 days in base camp. This final interview is on day 3 after we've got back, and all the teams are leaving. They've all left. I said to the team, I said, guys, you get going. The yak trains, yaks are big animals that we work with up on these hills in the Himalaya to transport our gear. Everyone was leaving. I said, I'm just going to sit on a rock, and I'm just going to share some ideas to camera at day 60. I'll play the interview for you.
Well, g'day. Here we are, and it's May 27, officially day 60 of the expedition, and we're punching out of base camp today. So what a journey. You know, it's 60 days, 29,000 feet, minus 40, 50 degrees, lots of challenge, lots of growth. I think the one bit of advice I'd give coming out of this experience is that, you know, anything that you want to achieve, no matter what your Everest is, you hang on to it hard. I've had this goal for 25 years. I've had lots of distraction. I've had lots of people that, whether consciously or subconsciously, I guess they tell you not to aspire to too much, not to dream too big of goals. I can tell you from this experience, don't ever let go of your goal. You hang on to it hard. I'm a pretty average bloke, but just living some big dreams and hanging on to them hard. And most important thing I think coming out of this is believe in yourself. Just doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You believe in yourself. That's the most important thing.
Guys, I hope you've enjoyed my journey up a little hill called Everest. I hope that most importantly, I hope there's been some key things. There's been some value in some of those lessons I've drilled out for you that, as I said, for me have, on reflection, have been very helpful in our business world to achieve what we've achieved, and hopefully there's some relevance to you, some synergy with your own businesses, your own Everest that you're tackling at the moment. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that pretty amazing or what, right? So this is really awesome. This is like a thing for Steve too. It's a first time he's presenting from Sydney, like online like this. So it's really, really cool. Steve's super busy, obviously, his real estate business. I'm just going to take one or two quick questions if we've got something. It's cool, we'll go to a little break. But, you know, there's so many amazing things that come out of it. What I love about Steve is, you know, he's an ordinary guy, like I said, that's done something extraordinary and continues